All right. So now we're going to have some fun. We're going to look at a scenario and we're going to see from different perspectives and different attribution models how we're going to give credit to different sources of traffic. So take a look. We're having one user and he's come to this website 3 times. The first time he came, he clicked on a Google ad. He started his session, and session start means that an event actually fires in Google Analytics when someone starts their session on the site. He added an item to a cart and he viewed an item. The second time he came back, he came to the site through an organic search on Google. His session started, he scrolled down the page, and then he happened to sign up for a newsletter. And you can see that that sign up was an actual conversion, right? It was set up as a conversion on the website. Then a third time, he got an email, Labor Day. He clicked on the email, the session started, he added an item to cart, and then he actually purchased those new pair of Nike shoes. So let's go ahead and let's analyze who gets the credit and who gets the credit for what. Okay, so in this first scenario, we're going to be looking at the sign up conversion event. This sign up that occurred, that they signed up for a newsletter. That's important, right? Because when people sign up for newsletters, they get the newsletters and they actually buy something, right? So remember, let's go back to our scopes. We have 3 scopes: user scope, session scope, and event scope. So from the first user source, who is going to get that credit? Who's going to get the credit for the signup? Is it going to be Google Ads, Google Organic, or email? So the answer is, because we're looking at the first user source, it's going to be Google Ads, because the user source is looking from the user perspective. This user A, what brought him to the site in the first place? Google Ad. He gets the credit. Now for session, now we're zooming in a little more. Okay, looking at this session, who should get the credit? Is it going to be ads, organic email? And you guessed it right. It's going to be Google Organic, because that was the last, remember, Google Organic is last click, right? It's the, session source is last click. It's the last thing they did before this session where they actually went ahead and clicked the sign up. And then finally, if we were looking at source, which means just the event level, what would you give credit to? And the answer is that by default, we said ideally it should be data driven. So since the event happened here, Google's going to come up with their data driven model. You know what? We're going to give some of the credit to Google Ads. We'll give some of the credit to Google Organic, but we're going to look at the whole picture. So now think about this. If I go into Google Analytics now, I can actually go down and pull down and say, I want to see the first user source of my conversions. I want to see the session source. I want to see the source. So there's 3 sources that you could pull down in order to see into your reports. And remember, a couple of videos back, we spoke about in the reporting section, there's like the user report and there's the traffic report. The default of the user report is this. It looks at the first user source. The default of the traffic acquisition report is the session source. Okay, we're going to keep going so that we can get some more understanding and examples of how this works. All right, so now let's look at the purchase conversion, where they went ahead and actually purchased the item on their last visit. Who is going to get the credit from a first user source perspective? Well, you got it right. It's the same as before, because from the first user source perspective, we're always looking at the first thing that brought them. Now, from the session source, who is going to get credit? You guessed it right, because when did they purchase? It was during the session that came from clicking on the email. And therefore, email was the last thing that brought them here, and therefore it gets all the credit. And finally, if I were to go ahead and just look at source on its own, who would get the credit? There you go. Right again. Data-driven model. The data-driven model will be the model that Google goes ahead and sets it up and will give credit, some to the ad, some to the organic, some to the email. Now remember, you could set that last one, source, to be whichever model you want, but what's recommended is data-driven, and therefore in our examples, we're going to go ahead and do it that way. So once again, if we kind of throw it all together, if I'm looking at the sign-up conversion event, depending on which source I'm looking at, from the view of the user, or from the view of the session, or from the data-driven model, you can see things are very different. Same thing here. If I look from the purchase conversion event perspective, things are also going to look very different. And what this does is this kind of shows you the complexity of how Google Analytics works. And now you'll understand that when you're looking through your report and you see, hey, there's 3 types of sources, which one should I choose? Now you have a better idea of how each one works and how it's looking at the data or how it's looking at the user in order to better understand. Okay, so when assigning attribution, there's the concept of how far should I look back, right? How far do the events that happen, like, are they considered? So in this case, you can see that we have two settings that we can set up. Number one is the acquisition conversion event. That means, when do I consider like the first time someone opened something or the first time they visited? When is that considered? So recommended is that we keep this window open for 30 days. That means we look at everything, the first thing that happened in 30 days. But what if they visited the site before? So before 30 days, we're not going to consider that. So imagine, let's say they clicked on an ad 45 days ago and they visited and they clicked on a Facebook ad in 29 days. If I look at it from the first user perspective, we don't even look at that Google ad because that's before 30 days. I will look as the Facebook ad as being the first thing. Okay. So first, when we're looking at the first perspective from the user, you either have the option to set it at 7 days or 30 days. All other conversion events, you can select 30, 60, or 90 days as being your look back window. And the example that I gave, you can see this a little bit better from this example, where if my look back window is 90 days, so look, someone came to your site originally through email, then clicked on an ad, came through organically, and then came through organically. So if I have the data-driven model, it's going to give credit to all of these things here at a certain percentage. Hey, what about email? The reason is because it's longer than 90 days. We don't look at it. Last non-direct attribution model means the last click that they did, beside ignoring direct. Here, it's going to give all the credit to organic. In this case, it really makes no difference what happened because we're anyway looking at the last thing that happened. Finally, the first interaction attribution model, which is the default of first user, right? When we're looking at the user perspective, even though in truth, the first thing that actually brought them to the site was email, but because that event happened before 90 days, when I look at my Google Analytics reports, it will not give credit to email. It will only look at the past 90 days and give credit to Google Ads. So just looking at this look back one more time, the maximum look back is 90 days. There's preset options of 90, 60, 30. If you make changes to this, it's not retroactive. That means that once you set a look back and the data in Google Analytics comes, it's set. If you change it again, it's not going to change things from before. So you got to keep that in mind. We see that in Google Analytics 4, there are a lot of retroactive things. This is not one of them. Last thing is it introduces the concept of that acquisition conversion event, which is the first thing they did. In that case, that's only a 30 or a 7-day concept. Here is another point that's related, but this is about data retention. How long? So it's sort of like, now that you're telling me that I've got lengths of time that I can consider sources, let's look back in general. Like, how long does Google keep your data? So This is the amount of time before the user level data stored in Google Analytics is automatically deleted from analytics servers. In Google Analytics 4, this only affects the explorations center. Now, if you remember, the two areas of Google Analytics that you get reports is the reporting section, and then the exploration is more of like those custom reports. This will affect only the exploration. The regular reporting, that data is kept forever, unless Google decides to change analytic platforms and versions. Okay, the recommended event data retention is 14 months. This will easily allow you year-over-year reporting at the user and event level data. Remember, we've got user, session, event. At these levels, if I'm running analyses, I can do year-over-year, meaning if I want to see how I did in March of this year compared to March of last year, it will allow me to do that. However, it is important that the data retention settings aligns with the client with like legal terms. So it could be that some people say, we only keep your data for 10 days, right? So then you better only set this to 10 days. Most people, you don't have to worry about it. 14 months and you're good. But remember, this doesn't affect the main reporting. It only affects the special reports that are developed in the exploration tab in your left-hand navigation. So just in summary, it allows up to 14 months of data retention. It also offers a 2-month retention period. I guess that means like the 12 plus the 2. GA4 allows up to 50 months of retention. So you could actually go ahead and do it up. You've got 14, but you can do it up to 50. Google Signals, I think, is another product that has 26 months retention. So that's basically a wrap when it's coming to scope, data, and attribution. And hopefully now you have a better understanding that there's really 3 different ways that you can look at the data in Google Analytics from the perspective of the user, which looks at the first interaction, from the perspective of the session, which is going to look at the last interaction, and then the overall perspective of Google Analytics by default, where it's recommended to do data-driven, but you can set it up to different models if you like to see the data. And you always have the ability to compare models in the special model comparison tool.